Hey everybody, welcome back to the Live Ultralight podcast powered by Outdoor Vitals. Today we have a very special guest that is going to be helping us with our mission of getting people into the backcountry in a different way. This is a very unique episode, I would say, compared to other guests we've had on in the past. We have Dustin Wittwer coming on. Dustin is an avid outdoorsman. He grew up more of a cowboy, quote unquote, around horses, all that. Grew up a hunter. And then, worked in archery shops and different things like that as he grew up. But Dustin and me have a very interesting conversation around the topic of llamas and goats and utilizing them to get into the backcountry and how they can be a phenomenal asset and a phenomenal tool to pack more, maybe take people into the backcountry that physically might struggle. I've considered taking llamas into the backcountry to bring my kids into the backcountry. There's a whole plethora of reasons why llamas and goats could be really, really cool options to consider. So we have a big, long conversation about llamas that's, I would say, going to be quite entertaining. They're, llamas and goats can have characters of their own, and we each have kind of some stories to tell there. We also talk a little bit about hunting and why both of us actually are hunters. We grew up hunting and why we continue to do that and just some of the benefits to conservation as well. And then last, we end with talking about his side business called Backpack Logistics, which is essentially a meal planning company that allows you to pick everything, choose everything, and just hit submit, and then he packages it all up into individual days for you and mails that to you. So a really phenomenal service that we get into the weeds on. So really enjoyed this, as well as talking about his energy drink, him being an energy drink connoisseur and whatnot. Just a really fun, really interesting conversation with Dustin Wittwer. So stay tuned to the end. I think you'll enjoy the different topics that we go through, and really appreciate Dustin coming on for this interview. All right, Dustin, it's good to have you on the podcast. I've listened to your podcast for quite a few years. Really enjoy your insight on and just level of expertise on a lot of different things. So I'm looking forward to this. But I want to start off with the classic. You are an expert in energy drinks, so what are you drinking today, and what's your recommendation for the day?
Oh, listen. Let's get this out of the way right now. The White Monster is and probably always will be the greatest energy drink that's ever been made, in my opinion. And I can say that because I am a connoisseur of sorts. I've tried and reviewed, what feels like thousands. It's probably like 27, but it feels like a lot of energy drink reviews everywhere I go. It's one of those things, you just start making content about what you love and what you do. And I realized I'm drinking one of these babies every day. I might as well branch out and provide the people some value. So,
well, it's entertaining. I would have to say, from following a little bit on Instagram, that 27 would be like a low mark. I don't know. You find some of the craziest energy drinks I've ever seen. And they just keep coming. I don't know where you find these. Like, are these just gas stations, or are you like specialty ordering some of these crazy ones in?
Listen, at my level, you never divulge your secrets. I have people sending me energy drinks at this point. I've had friends come from overseas trips and bring me these, they're in, I can't even remember what language it was in. So yeah, anywhere and everywhere, I've got some hot spots. That's
dangerous.
It's like good backpacking spots or good, hunting spots. You don't really talk about it,
Well, I could share a quick story on that, of what not to do. I was in Vietnam, touring some factories and I swung into a gas station and I see like a Red Bull can next to another Red Bull can in this gas station. And I'm looking at them. I say, that one's 3 times the price, but it looks American. That one's a quarter of the price, And so I'm like, I'm just going to snag that one. So I take it. We're driving like 10 miles in a car, which I thought would be 10 minutes. But of course, it was over an hour ride in Ho Chi Minh. And I drank this, I'm just going to say knockoff Red Bull. And it was one of the worst decisions of my life. It backfired. I mean, I was so sick, and like the rest of the day I didn't feel good. I was like, I don't know what the heck is in this, but it was too much for me.
Yeah, there's a lot of those little private label, you get one and it's what was that one I did once? Rooster Booster, some weird, and there you can just tell, oh, this is just a knockoff Red Bull or, whatever it is. But yeah, I drink them every day. I love it. So I just hit record and I'm sure no one listens, but it's fun.
What's last question, I guess, on this topic? What's the biggest performance benefit you get from energy drinks? I mean, does it go farther than just energy? Like,
I don't know what you're hinting at.
I'm just curious,
Yeah,
if you're convincing people they need to try energy drinks, right? Maybe they've heard they're bad.
Well,
or maybe you're like, it's not just about energy. It's something else.
Hey, first of all, if you really, let's get into the science. Packed with vitamins, right? Where else am I going to get my 490% of my B12 for the day? So there's that, right? Packed full of vitamins. Yeah. And then, I'm a member of the Mormon, Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. And so, where most guys would wake up and have their coffee, I have my Mormon coffee. Maybe that's what the M stands for. I don't know, right? Mormon coffee, because that's legal. And so it just gives me all the benefits.
Yeah. A high performer like you, there's got to be some cognitive benefit in there too. So,
yeah.
But anywho, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to have you. You're what I would consider an expert on a handful of things that will be a step in a different direction than we typically go on this podcast, but I think are really valuable and things that have been top of mind for me. One of which is livestock in the backcountry and just kind of pros and cons of different types of livestock and what they can offer to a trip. I think archery is a very interesting thing. I've grown up doing a little bit of archery, but I know you're really an expert in that. And so whether you're into hunting, which is one of your primary focuses on it, or just as a hobby, I think there's some fun things to unpack there. And then, just want to hear a little bit more on some of the other projects you have going on, such as your food logistics and other things. So let's dive straight into, backpacking with livestock. I think the common thread is, you backpack with mules and horses. But in recent years, there's just been all sorts of things. People start backpacking more and more with different types of animals, and whether that be pack goats or llamas, which is kind of more of your expertise, it sounds like lately. But I would say personally, I've never been someone who's really looked at that as something that I'm highly interested in. But recently, I've gotten more interested in it, and a lot of that has to do with coming from the perspective of bringing my kids along. So I've got a 6-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl, and I'll take them backpacking, but you're pretty limited to a couple miles in, couple miles out. And I've seen some others in the industry that are using llamas to get way in there, and even have kids ride the llamas and all sorts of things like that, where it just looks like you could have a completely different and new experience in the backcountry. So yeah. I'm happy to take this wherever we want to go. I guess starting off, why do you use livestock when you go backpacking? And maybe that's not every time, but when you do.
Yeah, and that's you just hinted on a good topic. Is it's not, first thing I'll say is they're not always the right answer. It's hard for me not to relate everything to a hunt, a backcountry hunt. But even backpacking, like you said, if you're just doing a quick weekend fishing trip, right, and it's going to be a 1 or 2 nighter, and you're going 2.5 miles, 3.5 miles or something. It's summertime. There's probably not going to be bad weather, right? I'm probably not going to go through the rigmarole of, because they add a whole different dynamic of logistics and so they're not always doing, whether it's horses or goats or llamas or whatever, it's not always the best answer. taking a step back, my background, we actually grew up around horses. My dad and my grandpa ran like a guided hunting business where clients come in and they weren't running the backcountry with them, but they were using horses to ride around on, kind of like a trail ride for the day or whatever, that you might sign up for here outside of Cody or whatever. And so, but even before that, as a little kid, dad was riding horses, breaking horses. I was falling asleep on horses as a 2-year-old going on rides with my dad. So my brother and I, our background was really in horses, and that's what we had experienced and knew. Fast forward to, my early 20s, and we got really serious about not just hunting, but backpack hunting, because I love hunting, and we can talk about that and why and what, but I really love just being in the backcountry, especially nowadays, unhooking from everything, disconnecting, the drill, right? Getting back there. And so we went down the road of, we for years just pack camp on our back. And, it's one thing when you're backpacking or just going on a fishing trip or whatever, because the heaviest your pack is ever going to be is when you leave the trailhead, basically, right? Maybe unless you fill up with water at some point. But when you're hunting, and if you're very good, eventually you're gonna knock something down, and you're gonna, one of the pieces of the pie of why we hunt is to take the meat and bring it home to our families. And meat's heavy, especially, a mule deer, and we can talk some of the stories and stuff, but mule deer, and then even like elk, especially, and anything bigger, you just almost ethically can't hunt in certain areas without using livestock of some kind, because one person just can't pack, an entire bull elk out or whatever from 15 miles deep. And so that led us, with our background in horses, it actually turned us off originally to horses, because we saw how the sausage is made, so to speak, right? We saw all the stuff that goes into dealing with horses. And that led us down the road, actually, of pack goats, first of all.
Okay.
And so, again, early 20s, and I had done a little research, talked to a few guys, and ended up with 2 female pack goats that were no stellar bloodlines or anything. There's a couple breeds and stuff that guys
typically, like monster alpine ones that are like 200-pound goats.
Well, they were alpines, and they were young, so I don't know, these females weren't going to get that big quite, but they were alpines. But then there's like meat goats and stuff that you obviously wouldn't pack with, but these were backpacking goats of some kind. And so I got 2 of these with the intention of having them bred and starting our own little pack goat deal. Cause again, we can talk pack goats and what that entails. There's a whole bottle feeding, imprinting thing you have to do with them to get them to follow you around. Right. Well, in between buying those and actually pulling all that off, I'm researching more, and I'm finding out more and more about these pack llamas. And the more we read about pack llamas and learned, it's like, man, I think this is actually for us. And so that led us to our first, we actually rented them ourselves from a really good friend named Bo Beatty that's up in Idaho. That's, kind of the modern king of pack llamas. There's definitely some OGs way before him ever, but he's kind of the modern guy. And we rented from him, fell in love with it, and then kind of went from there and got our own. And I'll let you kind of pick up from there with where you want to go with that. But that's kind of the origin story of my background with pack animals, horses. And we still I have 4 horses out in my field right now. We've rented llamas, the whole deal. So I'll let you kind of run with that, but that's the origin story. Did
you ever actually use the pack goats then, or did you kind of end up skipping over it?
I've never actually packed with goats. And here's the reason why. Well, I mean, not that I'm like offended by it or anything. I'm not like, anti packing with goats, but it just never came to that. We didn't like a couple things. First is imprinting. With goats, they're not led on a lead rope. They literally just follow you. In order for a goat to be imprinted like that, they literally bottle feed them. They pull them off their mom when they're 2 days old at least, and they milk like they would a cow, and then they bottle feed. The human bottle feeds them. And so that gets them extremely attached to you. You do that for 2, 3, 4 weeks or whatever it was. And now you have a goat that's tied to your hip, and you do that with a whole string of them. And so then these goats, you're their mom, and they'll follow you off a cliff probably. That brings up its own set of issues when you're, if you're just on a family camping trip, I don't think that's a problem. But when you're out there trying to get close to other animals and you're out stalking, some of the guys were literally taking their pack goats with them on these like bow hunting stalks, right? And I just found that a little, and again, probably because I've never actually done it and seen it, but just from hearing it and knowing how to hunt and stuff, I'm like, man, I don't know if I want to mess with that. Pack goats are susceptible to the weather. So summer and early fall, probably not a big deal. But once you get into like late September, early October, I mean, there a couple of years ago down in Colorado, early, like first week in September, they got hit with like a 2-foot snowstorm up in the high country. Goats, they're either like, you got to get them under some shelter. Guys are packing their own little, sheds or tarps or whatever to put goats under, because they can't just brave, a 10-degree sideways snowstorm for very long. They'll get sick or whatever. Didn't like that. Didn't like they just kind of, they make a little more noise, I think. And they don't pack as much per goat. So you have to have quite a few of them. Right. So never actually packed with them myself. Know a handful of guys that are pretty hardcore with them, and they love them. Like, there's something to it, because the guys who have them, they love them and they're diehards. But we fell in love with llamas, and it'd be, between llamas and goats, it'd be hard to talk me out of the llamas.
Yeah. Well, I think for most people that are looking at it from the perspective of maybe backpacking, I do think goats and llamas are probably more realistic. I think horses are just a bit more of a commitment. You're talking even more machinery, bigger trailers, different, just different things like that, and just more space, more feed. I think some of the interesting parts about goats would be they're maybe take up a little bit less space, maybe take a little bit less food, or they eat kind of anything, right? And I don't know if llamas are the same, but so from a cost perspective, they're pretty good. And then if you're backpacking, maybe 1 or 2 goats does do pretty good for you versus, say, hunting, when you do have, hundreds of pounds or 100 pounds of meat or something you're trying to get out of the field. So it's really interesting, I think, to hear those perspectives. And so I'm curious, what in your mind then just makes llamas so superior? What are like the highlights of a llama in the backcountry?
Yeah. And a couple things you touched on. I actually haven't done the weight to feed intake ratio, right? Goats they might be a little bit more efficient, they just might, relative to horses. I mean, llamas to horses, they ingest a 1/4 or a 1/5 of what a horse eats. So it's probably sways for llamas between those two. Goats and llamas, I'm not sure. They will eat anything, literally. I mean, the whole tin can, kind of persona, right? Like they'll eat your weeds, your everything. So that could be a benefit to some people. And then, if they don't have a lot of acreage. Llamas, here's what we loved about llamas. They are extremely low maintenance. All those things we just talked about with goats, a llama can handle any weather storm that you can throw at it. Dozens and dozens of times we've had them in the backcountry, late season or whatever, and a nasty storm rolls in, or even, we can talk about renting them. We rented them for years. Clients will send us video or picture, or they take them on a hunt that we know it's, October or November, they're heading into some nasty stuff. And like, you could stake a llama 10 feet from underneath a pine tree and just assume that they're smart enough to go sit under it. Poke your head out of the tent in the middle of a blizzard, and they're just out in the middle of the wide open. Like they just don't seem to care, right? That they come from, places down in South America that, that wool is key, and they can hunker down around their whole entire bottom half of their body is just completely almost like a blanket of wool over the top of them. They are built to handle anything you can throw at them here, basically in the lower 48, I think. So that was one plus. Very low maintenance as far as the feed goes as well. They'll basically munch and eat on anything up there, unless there's just flat out no grass and that real high alpine stuff way above tree line, then you got to drop down a little bit. But then the big thing with llamas is the water. They are part of the camel family. And so they can literally, and they'll go 2 to 3 days, even being worked hard, 2 to 3 days without, and they'll turn their nose up to water. And that in the backcountry, especially drought years, places where, because when you're hunting, especially, you're not just choosing your destination because you want to go there. You kind of have to be where the animals are and aren't. You don't want to. And so you're kind of at the mercy within reason of, a mile or two. And some of these places, high alpine Wyoming, high country in Nevada, where we grew up, there's just flat out no water. And so if you cross it 3.5 miles ago, like that's it, and you're packing it, or you might make one trip with the llamas every few days. But the fact that they can cross water, drink, and then not need water for 3 days, huge advantage in the backcountry. Relatively low maintenance as far as, the problem with horses is they take a lot of babysitting. They're extremely big, clumsy creatures. If they get their foot caught in a rope or whatever, they don't think through things extremely well. They have that panic gene. Llamas, and we can talk about some of those characteristics more, but they're very low maintenance when you go to stake them out and stuff. And then the business side of it, we could, you talked about the training and the skill set that you have to have with horses. You give us a 2-hour orientation with someone who has never seen, heard, or touched a llama in their life. And within 2 hours, we were completely confident sending them down the road with 3-4 llamas, and they're going to go on a week-long backpack trip and they'll be just fine for the most part. Right. So yeah, they just kind of met in the middle of, you can't ride them, but they're bigger. They can pack 80, 90 pounds each, these big packers. But they were a little more resilient than the goats. And so it just, for being a versatile backcountry hunter, especially, they were just super cool, super enticing.
Yeah. So you already touched on one of the questions I had, which is they can pack, up to 80, 90 pounds on the best llamas, right? Which is just a ton of weight. I mean, coming from an ultralight backpacking perspective, that's so much weight. I don't know what you'd be packing to the backcountry.
That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it, Jason.
The options.
The sky's the limit. Listen, the first couple times we went with llamas, because we were like you, right? Let's whittle this down. Let's cut our toothbrushes in half. Like, let's not even bring an extra pair of underwear for a week-long hunt. I mean, we've been there, right? And you get good at that. Like, you get really good at knowing, okay, like, that's unnecessary. All these things start whittling their way out of your pack. Food, obviously, we can talk about that, but like ultralight, calories per ounce, what's my overall weight, everything. As soon as you start packing with llamas, the first time we started walking through the Walmart on the way to the trailhead, and we're like doing the math, and we're saying, well, we still got like 40 pounds of food that we can pack. Like, what the heck do we even throw in here? And so we're just like, well, let's head down the Mountain Dew aisle and throw in, at that time it was Mountain Dews. Now it'd be White Monsters, right? But like, that's the beauty is, I've had pizza, I've had bratwurst, I've had, wow. I mean, almost anything, steaks and everything you can imagine. We get some of the panniers set up with like a little soft-sided, ice chest type thing. I mean, it is bougie living
That's
when
luxury.
you're back in
That is luxury.
Camp chairs, big
Big
cots,
camp chairs.
relatively big cots, bigger tents. I mean, everything, creature comforts, they call it.
Yeah. It's really enticing. No, it really, really is. Let's say because I think a lot of times you're kind of going in and setting up like a base camp and moving, maybe not even moving every day. But if you were to just take a llama on a backpacking loop, let's say, where you're covering, I don't know, 40 miles, going through some wilderness and whatnot, like what could a llama realistically, how much could they be walking per day? Maybe not fully loaded, but half loaded or 70% loaded. Like, are they going to want to stop walking, or are they going to want to just not quit covering miles at a certain point?
Llamas are just like people, right? It totally depends on how good a shape they're in. If you have a llama or two llamas and you leave them in your pasture all summer and they've been eating fat and healthy and they're overweight and lazy, they will get sick of 70 pounds after a few miles, especially if it's hot, and they'll lay down on you. They'll just plop down right in the middle of the trail and almost refuse to move. That you can usually get them up and get them going, but you start pulling stuff out of their pack. So it totally depends. But assuming that you've got one of these, and there's different breeds or different pedigrees of llamas, but assuming that you have a packing bred llama, which the association, I can't remember what it stands for, but it's CARA, CCARA, I think. CARA llamas, it'd be similar to like a AKC registered dog or whatever. CARA llama, and they're, most of those llamas are going to be spec wise to handle that much weight. They need to be, 40. Honestly, like that's probably the least important thing is actually how big they are. But the real genetically gifted ones, they're going to be in that 45 to 50s, like that magic mark with llamas where everyone's like, oh man, like this is a specimen. There's not many 50-inch at the withers. We're talking, there's not many 50-inch llamas out there, but you get the right genetics and a couple of them will hit that 350 to 450 on the really big boys. Anyway, if they're in shape and you've got all those boxes checked, like longer than you'll hike. I mean, they'll handle that 80 pounds, 15, 20 miles a day. I'm sure as long as you can last, they'll make it if they're in, good shape.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that's really enticing for sure. A while ago, I was out in Colorado, and I was, it was getting to be evening time, and I'm up on this hill, and I've got my brother who's kind of a couple of ridges over, and he was just walking a little too slow, so I left him and said, "We'll meet up at night. We'll camp right here by this lake." And I'm just watching this big moose down below me, right? I'm up above tree line. This moose is feeding down below me, and I'm thinking, man, this is so cool. I'm over 10 miles in and just enjoying this. And it's getting dimmer and dimmer to the point where it's getting hard to see. And all of a sudden, I just hear this roar, just this crazy roar. And I just like perked up, stood up. I'm like, what the heck was that? Like, is there a bear right underneath me? Why is this bear this high? Why is he roaring? And I look back down, and this moose is running. And I'm like, what the heck is chasing a moose? Like this is a bull moose. And this moose is just running. And I'm looking. I'm like, I know what a moose, the noises a moose make. And that's nothing like a moose. And so I'm kind of watching the moose, and I look away for a little bit, and then I hear it again. And I'm like, holy frick, there's a bear right down beneath me. And he's roaring, and this moose is running. I'm like, this dude's chasing this freaking moose. And the moose is running like right to where my brother is going to come up over the ridge. So I hit him on the Garmin inReach, and I'm like, dude, you got a moose in hot pursuit coming down the trail. I don't know what's chasing him. Like, this is crazy. And I've got like nothing, right? I'm just backpacking. And so, and I'm like, I don't want to go down below me, because right below me is where I was going to meet him to camp. And so I'm waiting, and he kind of comes moseying over, and I see his headlight breaching over the hill, and he's coming down, and he's not messaging me back. And I can see, because he'll pull out his phone, I can see his face light up, and I'm like, he sees my message, and he's just not saying anything. And so he gets closer and closer, and finally he gets, down close enough, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to go down and meet him and just let him know what's going on. And so I walk down the hill, I meet him, and I'm like, dude, did you not get my message? He's like, oh no, I got your messages. I'm like, well, dude, there's like a bear down here. Like, what are you doing coming right here? Like, let's go find somewhere else to camp tonight. And he's like, oh no, I met another hiker on the trail, and there's some llamas just right down here. So this moose had gotten too close to the llama camp, and they'd roared at him, and it's the most spine-chilling noise I think I've ever heard, and I'd never heard it before.
You're talking the Velociraptor screech thing.
I don't know what it was. It was unlike anything else I've ever heard, and the closest thing I could think of was some kind of a roaring noise. Yeah. And so I was like, what the heck? It terrified me. I was up there for, like 40 minutes in the dark just thinking, like, where the heck am I going to camp? Like, I'm not going down there. But anyways, that to me was actually a really cool aspect of llamas as well, is that they're protectors, right?
Yeah. I mean, in general, if you ever drive by like a farmer's field or something around town or outside of town or whatever, and maybe they have a bunch of sheep or goats or something out there, and there's a random llama out in the middle, it's because they're very protective. They're very relatively aggressive towards, predators and coyotes and stuff like that. So aside from a grizzly or maybe a black bear actually defending against them, like they'll, any local stray dog or a coyote or, probably bobcat or something like that, they're not, again, we've had them around our dogs and stuff all the time, and they don't get aggressive with our dogs because they're not, they know that they don't mean harm, but they square up with them real quick when, they're out in the pasture or whatever, and they don't back down. They're coming at them. And if, they get too close or too offended, they get aggressive, front paws are coming at them or whatever, or front hooves. That warning bark, the first time you hear it, imagine that story, but imagine me being the guy literally holding the lead of the llama, because we didn't really know about that. And same deal, we were in Utah with them, and a bear up on the ridge, and just all of a sudden, right, and this llama just right in my ear, and I was like, I about dropped the lead rope and freaked out. Same deal. And so at first it kind of freaked us out, but then after, a few times of that, we realized, especially at night in bear country, it became a little security blanket alarm, right? Like you can pretty much sleep in your tent and have, if you've got 3-4 llamas staked around you in a circle, nothing's, not that you might not lose a llama or something, but you're gonna know about it well before that bear ever gets to your tent, for sure.
Right. So I would say if you're someone who, gets a little nervous, maybe bear country, something like that, I think llamas could be it's another benefit of having a llama, right? Yep. So let's talk for just a second about what you and your brother do with renting llamas. What does that look like if someone was like, I'm interested in trying this out, or I've always wanted to go backpack into this wilderness, and it's just too daunting for me physically, or I want to take someone with me that's not a backpacker, and I want to make it a good time for them. There's sky's the limit on reasons why you'd want a llama for backcountry, but what does it entail to rent a llama? What kind of, maybe some rough pricing is too, would be interesting.
Yeah. Yep. So, first thing, don't be scared. It's like I said, you're going to, any reputable packer that's renting.
I'm going to cut you off for 1 second. Mm-hmm. Should we have a fear of getting spit on by a llama? Isn't that's a thing, right?
I was waiting for that. It's the number one question with renting or using llamas. Llamas, here's the deal. Llamas 100% spit. They will spit up a storm. It's usually at each other, and it's almost always over feed or proximity to another llama, right? It's kind of like how your dogs, if you have a few of them or something, they get around a different dog, they'll kind of nip at each other or bite, right? But the dog's not going to bite you unless you do something stupid or whatever. And llamas are kind of the same. I've had, in all our years, in the, dozens and dozens and dozens of llamas, I would say one, maybe two that were like ornery enough that they would spit at you coming into the corral or the pen or whatever to put a lead on them. Because the other thing about llamas that people hate, because they've got this persona on Instagram or whatever, just being like they're almost Insta famous, right? All these kids and girls and whatever, these kids, they love llamas, and you just want to give them a big bear hug and pet them, and they hate it. They'll allow touching in certain spots, like on their neck, right? Or on maybe on their withers, on their back a little bit, but like face, no go. Like 99% of llamas do not allow you to touch their face or anywhere near their head. Their feet and their legs, extreme no. And we can talk about kind of why that is, I think. But yeah, so they're by nature, they're kind of like ornery cats, right? They just would prefer not to be touched. Once you get, when they're trained and you kind of get them, like if I had them loose in my 4-acre pasture in the back, they're going to give me the runaround, most of them. And so you kind of
like to get a lead on them,
to get the halter on them. Right. So, it's a situation where you kind of, you hoax them in with some pellets or feed or some little treat that you have to get them into a small. And then once they're in a 20 by 20 little corral or something, they usually will give up. And, if they've been haltered before, it's usually the fight's over at that point. Obviously, if they're still fresh or wild, you got a rodeo on your hands. But anyway, so yes, they spit, usually rarely at you personally. Okay. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, can't say you'll never get spit on renting llamas or using llamas.
Okay. I had to throw that one in there. So. All right, back to the original question of if someone was to look at renting llamas from you. So, you have a company called Backcountry Logistics.
Yeah.
Or I don't know if it's your brother's company or yours, but.
No, it's between my brother and my dad and I. And it'll get a little confusing because we're so original that we had Backcountry Logistics for the llamas, and then we made Backpack Logistics for the food. So
I actually was looking for Backpack Logistics right before we hopped on, and I was like, what the heck is the name of that? Because I typed in Backcountry Logistics first, and then I was like, now what was the – but now I got it. I'll keep it straight.
Yeah. But anyway, so what to look for with llamas? First of all, find a reputable – they're – 6, 7, we've been doing this. How long has it been now? Probably pushing 10 years total, 8 or 9 at least. And when we started, there was almost no one, Bo and a handful of others that were renting them. There's definitely in the last 5 years, probably of the ones I'm aware of, probably doubled the amount of packers, that are at least making themselves known on Instagram and stuff. So there's more options. That usually means that, there's going to be some, I don't know, I don't want to call them wannabes, but just ones that are just trying to make a quick little deal or not taking it super serious. So, just make sure you've got someone that's reputable, just like anything, right? Get some references maybe. And then, after that, I mean, I can't remember the exact question, but I mean, again, ask, how many llamas do you need, right? Is another question you're going to get asked. And that, you can do the math, 60 to 80 pounds of llama, and kind of do the math of how many people are going. If it's just a backpack, excursion and there's no hunting involved or packing anything heavy after the fact, and you just want to live real nice. I mean, even one llama for every 2 people, you can imagine, right? An extra 40 pounds, that's like doubling your pack for the entire trip, right? I mean, that'll change a lot for everyone. 1 llama per person, you're going to be living like kings on just a normal backpack trip. So yeah, make sure that, make sure that you're getting that orientation, right? If they're running so rampant or so busy in the summers and stuff that they're like, yeah, hey, we were going to do that, but it just, have you dealt with, if they're just trying to get out of that, like make sure, especially obviously if you're new, they shouldn't be handing you, llamas without an orientation. Couple hours is what we used to do. I mean, just, obvious stuff, maybe like, hey, let me, can we see pictures of the gear that you're using? Maybe they're just getting started and they got, rickety packs and saddles. Pack equipment for llamas it's almost more expensive than a horse saddle, right? It's crazy. Mm-hmm. These new nice setups are like $1,000 to deck a llama out, right? For the saddle tree and then the two panniers. So, hey, show me the gear I'll be using ahead of time or whatever. If you're really searching out, honestly, the thing that's going to constrain you the most is just proximity and location, because, it's something that even if Bo's in Idaho and he's, a great guy to rent from, if you live down in Arizona and you're going to go backpack to Gila in New Mexico, like you ain't going to drive to Idaho to get your llamas. Right. So yeah, proximity is going to be the first thing. There's maybe 1 to 3 in your, 500-mile radius that you're willing to go. And that's where you're going to start. So, yeah, so did that answer? I mean,
as far as like transporting the llamas, what does that look like? Are you driving them to trails, or people hooking up to a trailer or like, what does that look like?
So as far as we understood, and I'll back up a little bit. We actually don't rent them anymore. That's how we started our business and how we grew them. It's what we use to get ourselves off the ground. And we did for 5 or 6 years there. We rented llamas. We basically reinvested every penny of that and more back into females. And so we've stacked up, at one point we've whittled it down a little bit, but we probably have 20 something, like, of some of the best genetic bloodline, well-built females that you can find. And we've kind of transitioned to more of a breeding operation, a cow-calf deal, right? Like a breeding operation that, we either sell them as weanlings and people take them. That's another thing to talk about, is kind of the life, the amount of time it takes to get a llama to maturation to pack. But we'll sell them as weanlings, or we might keep them for 2-3 years until they're ready to pack and train them ourselves, and then, kind of sell them that way. And we can talk prices and all that. But, so we left that and kind of go the rental side and went to that. But when we were doing it, as far as we understood, the business legality of it is because we didn't technically have like a guide license or whatever, we couldn't deliver or show up or take them anywhere. People had to come pick them up at our locations of our business, and then it was out of our hands. Otherwise, we were in breach of our jurisdiction, or whatever you want to call it. So that doesn't mean that someone doesn't have the local guide license or outfitter license or whatever, and they worked it out and they could meet you at a trailhead. I don't know. But as far as we knew, 99% of the time they were going to have to pick them up at our location, and we would rent them a trailer. And so as long as they had something to pull it with or whatever, you can, and you've probably seen people hauling llamas with everything, right? I mean, I've seen people shoving a llama into an Astro van. I've seen people put them, they load them in the back of their truck, right? With like just kind of a cattle rack in the back. And the nice thing about llamas, when they travel, they almost always just plop down where they're at. So, riding them in a van is really not that crazy, because once they get in there, they just sit down, they just lay down on themselves anyway. So your packer, your rental guy he'll say, hey, you either have to have this trailer. We got to the point where we would make them send us pictures of their trailer, because you can imagine what people would try to show up with anyway, just, be smart. And, if you're putting the llama's life at danger, just rent, spend the extra $50-$100 a day to rent a trailer. But most most rental operations will have something you can rent. Yeah, we can talk prices.
As far as pricing, what's just like a quick estimate on, like a 3-4 day trip?
Man, and it's funny you ask that because I can't even, I think off the top of my head, two llamas per day were probably about $100 each, I want to say. So let's say you're going on a 5-day trip, 2 llamas, and let's say you're renting a trailer, another $50 a day, probably. I mean, you might be 2 llamas, $500,000. I mean, you would probably be $1,500 maybe with the trailer rental on the low end. And maybe more now because again, it's become extremely popular even in the last 5 years since we gotten out of it. More and more people trying to do it. That's why there's all these packers rental operations popping up. So, $1,000 to $2,000 depending, on an average backpack 3 to 7 day trip, depending on how long you're going, probably per 2 llamas, I would guess.
Okay. Yeah. Super, super interesting. Do you have any, probably this might be my last question just on the llama front, but have you ever, had kids ride llamas or know much about like that side of things if you were going to, utilize llamas for helping kids get in and out of the backcountry?
Just our little nieces and nephews and stuff that we had over the years. They would plop down on them that, I've seen modified little pack saddles that are, saddles that would go on a llama for that. So it definitely exists. We never had any of that, and just within reason, a 60, 70 pound kid that, knows what they're doing and is comfortable. I mean, again, what you can't expect is you can't expect to just say, hey, we're going to rent llamas. And I have this 50 pound kid that's, whatever age that is. And then assume that you're going to show up and use the little, saddle buck that they give you for a pannier. And you're just going to throw your kid on there because they're like the little crisscross metal thing. And it's not how it works. So you would, if you're renting them for sure, you want to verbalize that, see if they have a specific saddle or something and what their rules and regulations are. But yeah, I've seen it for sure. People do it all the time. Seen it with goats. Seen it with goats. Yeah, I've seen it with goats. Buddy over in the Bighorns that has a couple goats, they modified a little pack saddle for a goat, and they're packing half the weight. So I'm guessing that kid was, 35, 40 pounds maybe. They have some big, almost 200 pound goats. So they handle 40, 50 pounds, no problem, but they had a little modified saddle. So
yeah. Yeah, with my kids, 35 pounds. That's about 2 years old. I got some big boned kids, man. They're growers. Okay. No, I think it's all super, super interesting. So I appreciate it. I know we probably don't have enough time to get into archery today. But maybe I'll just give you a second to talk a little bit again, just because you are kind of the first hunter that I've brought on the podcast. I've mentioned, multiple times myself. I'm a sportsman, our product designer. There's quite a few of us around the office that do hunt, grew up hunting. But maybe just give you a chance to kind of talk about what it is you love about hunting, the disconnect, or any aspect of it that keeps you going back to do cool adventures like you do.
First of all, I'll just reiterate, I appreciate and value the opportunity to sit down in front of or on a podcast with an audience of people who don't or haven't or probably don't hunt, right? Because it's a very fragile, we understand how fragile hunting is, and we appreciate and value the middle 80%, right, of the US population or whatever, the world population probably, that doesn't hunt but is okay with it. And so, I just realized, like, I literally have an elk head over my left shoulder. I didn't even realize that until now. But anyway, I appreciate that, and I'll try to present this in a way that, again, you don't need to get into hunting, but maybe you just be okay with it and understand it from a hunter's perspective. So, Yeah. What even was the exact question? Just how I got into it.
Yeah. Like what keeps you going back? Like, why do you continue to hunt? What do you get out of it? What do you love about it? Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot, man. That's the beauty of it, right? Is, it's not, I would be lying if I said that I just hunted for the meat, right? That's kind of the cop-out answer, especially when you're talking to people who don't hunt or aren't hunters. And we always like to just throw in, I just hunt for the meat. Well, yes, I take home everything that I kill and my family eats it. No different than, you going and eating an In-N-Out burger or going to Walmart and grabbing your chicken for the day or whatever, right? So yes, that is an absolute every single time, unless it's some, coyote weird critter that you're not going to eat, right? And there's legal game laws usually on what you have to and don't have to, and trust me, 99.9% of hunters err on the side of, they're packing their bear meat out and their lion meat and they're consuming it. Right. And so that's one piece of the pie is providing for my family. It's generational. I mean, just in my recent generation, my recent ancestry, like my great grandpa, my grandpa, my dad, we all hunted, for all these various reasons, but it's something that's been passed down from generation to generation to generation. I mentioned earlier the backcountry, right? It takes me to places that I would never have gone if I wasn't hunting, and I would never experience, you mentioned the moose and the llama and like just those experiences, right? And I could rattle off, things walking right up to me, things walking by me, things scaring the crap out of me, or, views that I get to see in the early morning, the late night, finding myself, right, scaring the living crap out of myself and becoming a better person. And all of the things, obviously the physical aspect of it, it keeps me, from drinking 2 Monsters a day and just one, so I don't get too fat, right? Because I have to watch what I eat a little bit so that I can get around back there. So it's, you really can't point to something that's not, overall good. The absolute challenge, right? The longer, hunting means different things for different people at different times in their life or in their progression of hunting. For example, when I first started hunting as a kid, 12-year-old, I'll be honest, like it was just the thrill of being out there and killing something. Like, not the thrill, I guess, but just it changes you, right? When you have to end the life of the thing that you're going to consume, that is a come to Jesus moment with yourself. And it changes you. But you, as a new hunter, I don't want to say you look forward to that, but it's an experience that you never forget. I was doing it to try and impress my dad, right? How big of how old of a buck or how big of a trophy can you get, right? That's, and all these things as I was younger have not left or whatever, but they just changed over the years. Now, if it was just about the kill, I've done this enough times and killed enough things that like I could go out every single year with every single tag I have probably and shoot something legal and bring it home, right? But I've had, just in the last 3 years, I've had just mule deer. I've had at least 6 or 7 mule deer tags in various states, right? Because, there's different ways and all these things that you get tags. I've had 6 or 7 mule deer tags in various states, most years 2 or 3, and I've only killed one animal on those 7 permits that allowed me to kill something. It's not because I didn't see deer. It's not because I'm not good enough to make the shot or that I missed. It's because I've morphed from the 12-year-old who was just looking to shoot the first legal thing because I had anxiety about not being successful and all these things, to like, I'm after the most mature, the oldest, the biggest scoring buck, be for various reasons, right? One, I think grown men and grown women who have hunted enough just owe it to themselves to keep trying to be a little bit better than just, shooting the easiest thing that they can find. Conservation of it, right? If you go out and just shoot the young ones every year, it's not beneficial for the herd, right? And we don't need to go too far into that, but when you go out and kill the oldest, let's say a mule deer's lifespan is 10 years, and I'm targeting deer that are in that last half of their life, 7, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 even, especially the older they get, they're really not the top breeders. The 3, 4, 5-year-old bucks are the strongest, biggest, baddest dudes when it comes to breeding season. And they're the ones that are going to go pass their genes around. But the problem is those 7, 8, 9-year-olds, they still get in the mix of things and they cause problems, right? This is a big one with bears, okay? People who don't hunt and are anti-hunting specifically, they rip apart bear hunting specifically and predators in general, but bears specifically because a few reasons. They've grown up with Disney, right? And bears they're Blue the bear, right? It's this cuddly, the picnic bear, right?
Winnie the Pooh?
Winnie the Pooh, but
Yogi
and Booby, right? And so that's what we grew up with. And so, to most non-hunters, deer and elk hunting makes sense, right? Because that's like a cow and a chicken, you go get your protein. Bears are a little different. I won't get into whether people always eat the bear meat or not, but regardless, it's a different feeling for people, right? Well, here's the nasty truth about bears. The older bears, which is what 98% of most adult hunters target, they are an absolute problem. What they do is they go find a sow that had cubs last year. It could even be their own offspring. They literally don't care because they're selfish and they're the animal world. And they'll find that year and a half old cub that they can absolutely dominate to the point of killing it. And guess what they do? They rip it apart on the spot as soon as they see it and they kill it because it puts that sow instantly, she goes back into heat. And so he gets what he wants. He literally doesn't care about the life of that other younger bear. And so those are the bears that people are targeting. And it's the same with the mule deer and the elk or whatever. Guys, again, youth will go out and shoot a lot of younger deer, whatever. But as we mature as hunters, we should be targeting, in my opinion, the older age class deer and elk and bears and whatever, because it's not a great ecosystem. And when they're not controlled a little bit, they're their own detriment to their own species a little bit, right? So Anyway, I hunt for the challenge of finding that biggest, baddest, oldest, sneakiest deer that's 10 years old and living in some freaking nook and cranny that you've never even been to, and you don't want to drop down in this nasty canyon. And he's past his breeding age. His antlers are probably regressing a little bit because he's so old and he's not getting the nutrients. He's probably not going to survive the next bad winter anyway. And so it's this perfect storm of he might as well go to sustenance for myself and my family. And it checks off all the boxes, right? And so anyway, a ton of reasons that I hunt or that other people hunt, and they're almost all extremely pure and extremely good motives. And I hate killing things, Tayson. I don't like it. I don't get the same. Again, it's not a thrill, but there's definite excitement and your blood pressure goes up. And, when you're little, right? When you're young kids, everybody reacts different. Little kids cry a lot of times because they don't know how to feel and stuff. I don't like it anymore, right? When I was a little kid, I used to go out and shoot every jackrabbit I could find. And, you might shoot squirrels out of your trees in your backyard or birds or sparrows when I was really little. I don't do that anymore. I have way more respect for that. And hopefully as, people go through the progression, they do too. It's not a fun part of it, but I understand the necessity because, again, no different than the beef that you grilled over 4th of July or the burgers or the chicken or anything that we use for protein and sustenance. somebody pulled the trigger. And if it wasn't you and you're in the restaurant, you're just killing it with your checkbook, right? It's no different. But I think that everyone should have to go through that once in their life if they're going to eat meat.
Yeah, it brings a different respect to the meat that you have, right? I mean, just to feed off of a few things that you said, I don't throw away any meat, right? Like we live in such a time of plenty, right? That you're always throwing away food. Right.
Until COVID hit.
Yeah.
And everyone freaked, right? Like, you're right. Like we had no problem, before we had no problem just scraping the meat. That's the other thing is you go to a restaurant and people who are anti-hunting or whatever, because, you didn't pack the bear meat out. They're the same people that will literally order a 48-ounce steak and eat 3/4 of it and throw the rest away and it goes in the garbage, right? And that's okay. So, it's like you can't just pick and choose, when we're going to care about meat and when we're not. Because all of a sudden when COVID hit, you remember going into the meat aisle, there was no meat aisle. It was gone. People were panicking, right? And so anyway.
Yeah, so I think it brings this different respect of like, the meat that you have, the meat that you cook, like you don't waste it because it was, an animal at some point and it was a life that's been taken for sustenance. And so you get very respectful of that. I know that I would say the most sad and sorrow that I've ever had is one time I had a freezer go out on me and I had a cow elk in there and the meat was gone, right? And I felt horrible for like a couple weeks. Like I mean, even thinking about it now, I'm like, man, because I walked up to that animal, I butchered that animal. I took that animal home. And if
that had been beef and chicken, it's not that you wouldn't
it wouldn't have crossed my mind,
exactly,
right?
Exactly, right? That's the respect that you get for the circle of life here. When you're the one that pulled the trigger, it's different. It's even more respectful than the chicken or the beef even in your fridge, because you didn't know that chicken, you didn't know that beef. It doesn't matter to you, right? It's just a meat. It's why, if anyone's wondering, it's why that thing hangs on my wall. And that's probably the bookend to all this is, because that's creepy to a lot of people, right? But as hunters, we go so far that we pay tribute almost. We respect the animal, even small, not like what you would call a trophy size rack or whatever. And that word trophy, we could dive in. That's a whole nother podcast. But regardless, I keep, I
can't throw them away.
At least bring out and I don't just throw all the antlers and the hide and everything away. It's like, man, especially the ones that were the hardest and the sneakiest and the biggest and the hardest to get, you really you want to pay tribute to them. And every time I walk by that elk, I remember that archery shot and how tough that was and the pack out and the life that he lived and just oh man. And we packed the meat out and my family was there and it was a whole thing. And that reminds me of that. And I pay tribute to it every time I see it.
Yeah. And to me, cause I've got, horns and stuff from over the years, I can't, we just moved homes and I can't throw some of these old, not trophy racks away even because it's the legacy of that animal. Right. And so it's kind of it lives on per se, but going back to it, I definitely resonate with what you're saying. I think it's important that people understand this. I've eaten so many tags over the years because I'm the same as you. It's not I don't know. It is about finding those older, mature animals that have gone through their life cycle. And so there's a bull elk that I, was fortunate enough to take a few years ago with my bow, and he was in regress. He was an old bull that lived in this nasty canyon. I backpacked 13 days out of a backpack to take this animal. But what made that animal so special to me was he aged at 13 years old. So he could have winter killed the next year, teeth are ground down to nothing. He was basically going to starve to death, or he could kind of, go out like a warrior per se and have a quick, painless death. And then now we get to eat him and all that. And so that to me is a perfect example and was the bookend for me on that particular scenario of, I actually did chase around a few bigger animals. but he was a big bull, but he was dying. I mean, his life was over, and it was just a ticking time clock. So
because if you hadn't come along, let me tell you how that ends for people.
It's not fun.
he either starves to death, which is a long, drawn out, nasty process. He gets attacked by a mountain lion because he's too weak to defend himself. And that is even less pretty, right? That is an absolute brutal death, right? Or what, right? I mean, he gets eaten, you did him a favor. If anyone understands and is mature enough to think that through, like, that was the best possible scenario for him, as a clean, kill. He was probably dead within less than a minute, 30 seconds. It was over. And he, like you said, you fed your family, and it was just a perfect bookend to his life.
Yeah. Or even on that bear topic, on that same backpacking trip where with the moose and the llamas, I came across just bones and debris from a recent fawn, a baby deer that had been killed. And you could tell, it's one of those scenarios where a bear had sniffed it into its bed and eaten this fawn, so that the circle of life is brutal, and we play a part for sure. We kill more animals by existing, than we ever will from pulling a trigger or drawing a bow back. But I was down around Park City area for 4th of July. We met with a bunch of family, and we were just down in the area, and the encroachment of the development in some of the most prime, I've been doing this my whole life. I can see where prime deer and elk habitat is. I know the area extremely well. There would 100% be deer living in this canyon right here if there wasn't 14 multi-million-dollar homes going up. And it doesn't matter, multi-million or a housing tract, a trailer park where an old field used to be. Whether it's the mouse and the moles and all the little things that you killed to put your trailer park there, or the deer and the elk that can't eat where your Park City mansion is, why is the mouse's life any less important than the moose, right? And so it all is the same thing. And yeah, I mean, you want to talk about killing, just an incomprehensible number of animals that, again, you don't see that, and it's not like you register it as wasting it or not utilizing it, but it happens, right? It's totally killing it with your housing, freeways, highways, just changing up their ability to migrate, all of that. So, anyways, I wanted to give you that second. Last thing I wanted to touch on here, because I know we've gone over on time, is just you have another business for backpacking food. So, really quick, tell me your favorite backpacking food, and then what this last business is, and then I'll let you go here.
Listen, my favorite backpacking food is a white monster, right? And we offer those to put in your day's worth of food.
A dehydrated white monster?
No. But we packed a little 10 or 12 ounces, not the adult size 16s. No, I mean, my favorite, it's hard to beat like a fruit snack or a pack of Gushers or High Chews or something like that. I've got my favorites within each category. Listen, this backpack thing's quick and easy, right? I've done this a lot of years, a lot of time. And I got so sick and tired every single spring or summer when you first get your gear out from the winter, and you pull out that food bin, right? And it's like moldy jerky from last year, an economy size of trail mix that you had to buy so that you could divvy up all the days worth of food, and it spilled all over the bottom. There's some brown thing that's, stained in the bottom too, that it's all sticking to. You don't even know what that is. Little Ziploc bags just everywhere. The only thing that would really last and work from year to year is like a freeze-dried meal, because they last forever. But that process of pulling all that food out, throwing away, wasting a lot of food, right? Talking about wasting food. The logistics of getting ready for a trip where it's the last thing that I would think of. And so it's this huge stressor in the back of my mind.
You're up at midnight.
You're running to Walmart or REI or wherever the night before the hunt or the trip, and you're grabbing all this stuff. You don't completely know what you have, so you usually buy too much or you forget something. I've been on the way to the trailhead happens all the time, right? On the way to the trailhead, I got to stop at Walmart in Denver, to grab, a huge bag of jerky and trail mix. And then I have to sit on my tailgate out there and divvy them up and weigh them. I got my little stupid, portable scale. Like, how many calories is this day and that day? And that's if you pull it off. If you don't, you get in the backcountry and you forgot to stop and you get back there and you're like, I've got 1,200 calories for the day. I hope I make it, and it's just like, so all that collectively went into this idea of backpack logistics. It's literally an out of my front room, living room business where we inventory, not 100%, not even 90 or 80% probably, but a fair majority of the most popular items that you would use or similar stuff for backpack food. And it's really a website experience. I say that ironically because right now my website was down this morning and my web person's working on it. But when it's by the time this launches, it should be up. It's a website experience where you go on and you not only put your backpack food in, but you build an entire day worth of food. It's the only place I know of that offers this. So breakfast, lunch, dinner, 4 snacks, mixes, energy drink mixes, recoveries, instant coffees, or whatever, all these little things. And then you build an entire day's worth of food. While you're building it, you can see the calories tally up as you add each item, the total weight and the calories per ounce, along with all of the macros. So you see at the end, okay, this is going to be my day of food. I'm at 2973 calories. I'm at 1.5 pounds or whatever. And boom, I hit my macros, or nope, I need to get more protein, or whatever you want to do. And then you hit send on that. You can order 10 of that same setup. You can order 10 new ones. But whatever the order is, we bag that up in like a 1 gallon 1 gallon kind of, back sealed bag that comes sealed at the top. But then once you open it, it's got a
zipper. So you'll press seal them. Do you press seal those then? Okay. Awesome.
I used to, when we first started, I actually vac sealed them, and every once in a while they would come unvac sealed, whatever. And B, we didn't really see the point. I mean, they, even when it's not, it's only, so if you're really small backpack that you're packing in and you've got to cram it in, I could see a little bit of value there, but we just seal them, kind of push them down as tight as we can get them and then just seal them off. But anyway, that whole thing shows up to you ready to hike. We label it on the outside. That's just a little bag that I made for myself, so I don't have the label, but we label it on the outside, all the items that you ordered, the weight and the calories that are in there, and boom, like usually shows up in, I would say 3 to 5 days from ordering it, within the week, and you're going backpacking.
Wow. That's a phenomenal tool. Really has my head spinning, because one of my least favorite things is packing food. And then if I skimp on it, I get out there and I'm pissed because I'm like, that was the dumbest thing. Now I got to eat like crap for 4 days, or vice versa. I'm up at midnight counting calories in bags, and I'm just like, this is the worst. So really cool solution. Really, really like that. So backpack logistics. I'm definitely going to check it out when your site's back on here. Definitely want to play around with that, and maybe I'll be sneaking an order over for some hunts I have later this year. So
yeah, for sure,
a lot of fun. Okay, well, I really appreciate you coming on. I loved learning more about Llamas. I think it's a really cool tool, a really cool option for people to consider. If you're, a listener of this podcast for sure that has not maybe had some of the opportunities, or maybe the people that you want to hike with aren't capable, to maybe get into some of these amazing backcountry wilderness areas, I highly advise it. It's the best. It's that disconnect from all this technology, everything coming at you a million miles an hour. It allows you to really reset life. And I've never found anything in my life that does it quite like getting into the backcountry and into the wilderness. So Llamas are a phenomenal tool to do that. Just like Dustin said already too, pay attention to, even if you're not a hunter, just keeping those rights open. We didn't even get into the conservation side, how much money hunters put into conservation of land and just everything that benefits us keeping these wild animals on the land, even though humans are doing everything we can to kill them and eradicate them with our buildings and our highways and our cars and everything. And then obviously, again, check out Backpack Logistics.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, all those tags that we talked about, and that's just over the last few years at deer. You know how much an out of state, meaning you're a non-resident, like usually $300 to $500 per species. And I'm not just deer, it's usually elk and maybe, whatever, antelope, 300 to 400 to 500, 600, sometimes more, that I literally donate. When I don't take something off the mountain, it's just going in, either way, it's going into the pot. And that's just a one little piece of the pie where all that money comes from, anyway.
Yeah. I mean, here in Utah, some of the tags that I'll draw require volunteer hours. There's all sorts of things that really get put back into the landscape. So I appreciate you talking over that. But go check out Dustin. If you're really interested in hunting, he also has a podcast called Finding Backcountry, phenomenal podcast. Great storyteller, great questions. Really enjoy that. And thanks for being on here today.
Hey, thanks for having me again. I appreciate your audience. Again, I understand the crowd that we're talking to, and if you got questions on the llamas, hit me on Instagram at Dustin Wittwer. I'm sure my name will be in the show notes or whatever, but always willing to point you in the right direction, get you hooked up with someone in your area. We know most of the people that rent llamas and stuff. Answer any questions about anything, hunting, packing, places to go, what to look for, anything. So,
yep. And if you need advice on energy drinks, you know where to find it. So thanks again, Dustin.
You bet, man. Thanks for having me.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that podcast. I really enjoyed that conversation and interview with Dustin. Just a lot of different perspectives and a lot of learning around llamas and all sorts of different things there. And again, just a really cool tool with this Backpack Logistics program that really can make getting out just that much easier and make sure that, like you said, I've been on trips where I did not pack food, spend the time to pack the food that I should have. I got out there and just had a miserable time with the food that I did pack. And so take it seriously and get the right food on trail. And it sounds like he has a phenomenal tool to help you do that. So, loved the interview. Hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. You can visit him at backpacklogistics.com or Dustin Wittwer on Instagram. I know he's quite active over there if you have any questions specifically for him, but thanks again for him. If you have not yet rated the podcast, please do so. That helps us grow and helps us with our mission of getting more people outdoors, getting them disconnected from technology and really reconnected with themselves. So please rate and review the podcast. Make sure you're subscribed, and we'll see you guys on a future episode.